Savannah Mitchell, 32, never imagined she would hear those words from her own parents' mouths. "Don't worry, we'll make your sister pay everything." The accidental voicemail that captured this conversation between her parents and brother Travis changed everything. As she sat in her car, tears streaming down her face, 15 years of financial manipulation suddenly made perfect sense. The family she had sacrificed everything for had been using her all along, and their plan was only getting started. Before I dive deeper into how my own family betrayed me and how I finally got justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever felt taken advantage of by family, hit that like button right now. Trust me, the karma in this story is worth sticking around for. Subscribe to hear more unbelievable but true family drama stories, because sometimes reality is more shocking than fiction. Now let's get back to how my world fell apart. Growing up in suburban Chicago, the dynamics in our household were always crystal clear. My younger brother Travis was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was expected to be the responsible one. Our parents, Richard and Linda Mitchell, never tried to hide their favoritism. While Travis received endless praise for mediocre achievements, I was constantly reminded that being smart means you should accomplish more. This pattern, established early, set the stage for decades of imbalance. After graduating high school as valedictorian, I received several scholarship offers, but chose to attend the local university to help care for my grandmother who had recently moved in with us. Travis, meanwhile, was encouraged to follow his dreams at an expensive out-of-state college despite his average grades. When I questioned why he deserved this opportunity, while I was expected to stay close to home, my mother simply said, "Your brother needs more support to succeed. You've always been independent." The financial disparity became more pronounced during our college years. I worked 2 jobs while maintaining a 3.9 gigapascals in my accounting program. My parents contributed nothing to my education, claiming they needed to focus resources on Travis, who was struggling with his business management courses. In reality, social media showed him partying regularly while barely passing his classes. Meanwhile, I graduated with $42, 0 inches student loan debt despite my scholarships and work income. When I landed my first accounting job at a respected firm in Chicago, my parents immediately asked if I could help the family financially. What began as occasional requests for grocery money or utility bill assistance quickly evolved into regular financial obligations. By my second year of employment, I was contributing nearly 30% of my monthly income to my parents' household and Travis's temporary needs. Any resistance was met with guilt-tripping about family duty and reminders that Travis was still finding his path. At 25, I was finally able to afford a modest 1-bedroom apartment of my own, though the move was met with disapproval. My mother complained that I was abandoning the family when they needed me, while my father suggested I was being selfish with my money. Despite living separately, the financial expectations only increased. Travis had graduated with a business degree but remained unemployed, claiming the job market was too competitive. My parents insisted I help cover his share of household expenses since he was going through a tough time. The pattern continued for years. Travis cycled through brief periods of employment followed by convenient layoffs or resignations due to toxic work environments. Each job loss was treated as an unfortunate circumstance beyond his control rather than a reflection of his work ethic. Meanwhile, I was promoted twice at my firm, earning a reputation for reliability and precision, the same qualities that made me an easy target for my family's financial demands. By my 30th birthday, I had delayed my own life goals, home ownership, travel, advanced education to support my family's needs and Travis's lifestyle. The breaking point came when my grandmother passed away, leaving a modest inheritance that my parents immediately suggested should be pooled for family use. When I expressed hesitation, my father remarked that I was becoming disturbingly materialistic, while my mother reminded me that family takes care of each other. What they didn't realize was that their manipulative tactics were finally losing their effectiveness. Years of therapy had helped me recognize the dysfunctional patterns in our family. I was beginning to understand that their behavior wasn't normal familial support, but financial abuse disguised as family loyalty. However, I still couldn't bring myself to sever ties completely. They were my family after all, and part of me still hoped things could change. Then came my brother's announcement that he wanted to open his own business, a sports bar that would supposedly capitalize on his networking skills. My parents were ecstatic already, planning the grand opening before he'd secured any funding. When all three turned expectant eyes to me during Sunday dinner, I knew exactly what was coming. The family ATM was expected to make another withdrawal, but this time it would be the largest one yet. The pivotal moment that changed everything happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I had called my parents' house to confirm our weekend plans. We were supposed to have a family meeting about Travis's business venture. When the call went to voicemail, I hung up without leaving a message, assuming I'd try again later. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification, a 3-minute voicemail from my parents' landline. Assuming they'd called me back, I pressed play without thinking twice. What I heard wasn't my mother's greeting, but muffled voices in mid-conversation. They had accidentally pocket-dialed me, unaware that their words were being recorded and sent directly to my voicemail. I almost hung up until I heard my name mentioned in a tone that made me freeze. Savannah's promotion means she'll be making at least $20,000 more this year. My father's voice came through clearly. That should be enough to cover the initial investment for Travis's bar. Do you think she'll push back this time? My mother asked. She seemed hesitant when we mentioned pooling Grandma's inheritance. My brother's laugh cut through the background noise. She always says she's done supporting me, but she caves every time. Just do what you always do. Tell her I'm depressed or that I'll have to move back home if the business fails. Don't worry about your sister, my father replied. Your mother and I have been managing her guilt since she was a child. We'll make her pay for everything. She's always been desperate for our approval. My mother's voice softened to that familiar manipulative tone I'd heard countless times. Besides, she doesn't have her own family to spend money on. What else would she do with it? At least this way she feels needed. To Savannah, the family ATM. Travis laughed and I heard the clinking of glasses. I sat paralyzed in my car, the phone still pressed to my ear as the voicemail ended. 15 years of financial support, delayed dreams, and endless sacrifice played through my mind like a cruel highlight reel. The family emergencies that always coincided with my bonuses. The guilt trips when I considered graduate school. The constant reminders that Travis needed help while I was naturally successful. It wasn't just the money, it was the calculated manipulation, the dismissal of my own needs and dreams, and the casual cruelty with which they discussed exploiting me. They had never seen me as a daughter or sister, but as a resource to be mined for my brother's benefit. Through tears, I replayed the message 3 times, each repetition hardening my resolve. I forwarded the voicemail to my email for safekeeping, then sat in silence, processing the irrefutable evidence of their betrayal. The family meeting about Travis's business was scheduled for Saturday, just 4 days away. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely clear about what I needed to do. That evening, I called my therapist for an emergency session and played her the voicemail. Her response validated what I already knew. This isn't a healthy family dynamic, Savannah. This is financial abuse. You're not responsible for supporting your adult brother or your parents' choices. The next morning, I contacted my bank and financial advisor to secure my accounts and review my financial position without family obligations. I was shocked to calculate that I'd given my family over $175,000 since starting my career, money that could have paid off my student loans years ago or provided a down payment on a house. As Saturday approached, I experienced a range of emotions: rage, grief, anxiety, and finally a strange sense of calm. The accidental voicemail hadn't created this situation, it had merely exposed the truth I'd been avoiding for years. My family had been using me, and now I had proof that couldn't be explained away or minimized. For the first time, I understood that their hold over me wasn't love or family loyalty, but carefully cultivated guilt and manipulation. The revelation was both devastating and liberating. I wasn't just Savannah, the dutiful daughter, anymore. I was Savannah, the survivor of financial abuse, and I was finally ready to break free. As I prepared for Saturday's confrontation, I organized bank statements, documented past loans that were never repaid, and made copies of the voicemail transcript. The evidence was overwhelming, but the hardest part would be facing the people who had raised me and recognizing that their love had always been conditional, contingent on my financial usefulness. With each passing hour, my determination grew stronger. I was done being the family ATM. Saturday would mark the end of their withdrawals and the beginning of my long overdue independence. Saturday arrived with an unusual sense of clarity. After years of dreading family gatherings that inevitably ended with my checkbook open, I approached this meeting with purpose. I dressed professionally, a habit from work that helped me feel composed, and arrived exactly on time, breaking my usual pattern of coming early to help prepare food. My mother answered the door with a quick hug and an immediate comment. "You're looking tired, sweetie." Working too hard as usual, the familiar subtle dig, simultaneously criticizing my appearance while praising my work ethic, barely registered. I was operating from a different script today. The house looked exactly as it always had, modestly furnished, but with conspicuous new additions that appeared whenever Travis needed something. The large flat-screen TV he'd needed for networking. The renovated garage that had become his temporary apartment after his third job loss. The kitchen where my mother was preparing an elaborate meal, likely funded by my last loan to help with household expenses. Travis lounged on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up as I entered, offering a casual "Hey sis." My father emerged from his study with a folder of papers I assumed contained the business plan for the sports bar, Travis's latest scheme that I was expected to finance. "Perfect timing, Savannah," my father said, his tone cheerful but eyes calculating. "We're all set to go through the numbers for Travis's venture. I think you'll be impressed with the potential return on investment." The familiar choreography began, my mother bringing drinks. Travis suddenly animated as he described his grand vision, my father presenting optimistic projections with the expertise of someone who had spent decades managing family finances without actually improving them. "We've found the perfect location," Travis explained, spreading photos across the coffee table. "It's in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The current owner is willing to sell at below market value if we can close quickly." My father nodded enthusiastically. "That's where timing is critical. We need to move fast before someone else snatches it up. Travis has already lined up some interested minor investors, but we need the bulk of the startup capital secured." My mother squeezed my hand. "Isn't it exciting? Your brother is finally finding his passion." I sat silently, observing their performance with new eyes. The eager expressions, the strategic pauses where I was expected to offer encouragement or ask questions that would demonstrate investment in the plan. The subtle ways they positioned themselves around me. My mother, beside me, offering emotional reassurance. My father across from me with authoritative documents. Travis displaying boyish enthusiasm that had always made it difficult to refuse. Knew him. The total startup costs come to $145,000. My father finally announced, sliding a paper toward me. With your recent promotion and your grandmother's inheritance, you should be able to cover it without too much strain. We've prepared the loan agreement, though, of course it's just a formality between family. The silence that followed was their cue to me. This was where I typically asked practical questions to show I'd considered the proposal seriously before eventually agreeing to whatever they asked. Instead, I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table. Before we discuss Travis's business plan, I'd like you all to listen to something I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I played the voicemail on speaker, watching their expressions transform as their own voices filled the room. My mother's face drained of color. My father's jaw tightened in that familiar way that signaled anger. Travis simply stared, his practiced charm evaporating. When the recording ended with their laughter and the toast to the family ATM, I let the silence stretch uncomfortably before speaking. I've calculated that since I started working, I've given this family $175, 893 inches loans, and emergency assistance, I said, placing a spreadsheet on the table. Not including the countless dinners, gifts, and smaller expenses I've covered. None of the loans have ever been repaid. My father recovered first, his expression shifting to indignation. You recorded us without consent. You called me accidentally, I corrected him, and inadvertently revealed the truth about how you view me and my role in this family. You're taking things out of context, my mother interjected, her voice taking on the wounded tone that had worked so effectively in the past. We were just worried about how to approach you. Travis attempted his usual deflection through humor. Come on, sis, we were just blowing off steam. You know how Dad gets carried away when he's talking business. I remained focused, refusing to be derailed by their tactics. I've spoken to a financial advisor and a therapist. Both use the same term for what's been happening: financial abuse. That's ridiculous, my father snapped. We're family. Families support each other. Support goes both ways, I replied. I've supported Travis through 3 degrees, 5 failed job attempts, and countless temporary financial situations. I've supported this household while delaying my own goals and dreams. Meanwhile, you've contributed nothing to my education, my career, or my well-being. My mother's eyes filled with tears, her reliable strategy when confronted. How can you say that? We've always been there for you emotionally. Have you? I asked, surprising myself with the genuine curiosity in my voice. When was the last time any of you asked about my goals or supported my decisions if they didn't benefit the family financially? The silence that followed was answer enough. I'm not here to negotiate, I continued, reclaiming the folder with Travis's business plan. I'm here to inform you that I will not be investing in the sports bar or providing any further financial support to this family. The ATM is closed. Travis's face flushed with anger. You can't just abandon us because you're having some kind of selfish crisis. That's not how family works. You're right about one thing, I agreed. This isn't how family should work. Family shouldn't strategize about how to manipulate one member for the benefit of another. Family shouldn't treat one child as an investment and another as a return. I stood, gathering my belongings with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. I've prepared letters for each of you outlining my decision and the boundaries I'm establishing moving forward. I suggest you start making alternative financial arrangements immediately. My father's expression hardened into the intimidating glare that had kept me compliant for years. If you walk out that door, don't expect to remain part of this family. The threat hung in the air, the ultimate leverage they had always held over me. The fear of being alone, cut off from my only family. But for the first time, it held no power. You stopped treating me like family years ago, I replied. You just forgot to tell me. I walked out of my childhood home that day with nothing but my dignity and the certainty that I had finally stood up for myself. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no tearful reconciliations, just the quiet closing of a door that had been unlocked for too long. The family meeting had ended, but my journey to reclaim my life was just beginning. The weeks following my confrontation with my family unfolded like the aftermath of a natural disaster, destruction followed by eerie silence, then the slow emergence of unfamiliar growth. I experienced moments of crushing doubt alternating with surges of empowerment. Had I overreacted? Was I the villain in this story for abandoning my family? Then I'd replay the voicemail again, hearing their casual cruelty, and my resolve would strengthen. 3 days after the meeting, the first text messages arrived. My mother's gentle guilt trips. I didn't raise you to turn your back on family. My father's thinly veiled threats. You'll regret burning this bridge when you need us, and Travis's attempts at minimizing. Can't believe you're making such a big deal out of a few jokes. I read each message carefully but didn't respond, following my therapist's advice to maintain distance while I established new boundaries. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly their tactics would escalate when their primary source of income, as me, cut them off. By the second week, my parents had reached out to extended family, crafting a narrative that painted me as unstable, ungrateful, and abandoning them in a time of financial crisis. Aunts and cousins I barely spoke to began sending concerned messages asking why I was punishing my family over a simple misunderstanding. The most painful call came from my grandmother's sister, Aunt Patricia, who had always been kind to me. "Your mother tells me you're refusing to help with Travis's business opportunity," she said, her disappointment evident. "She said you've been acting erratically since your promotion, becoming materialistic." I took a deep breath before responding. "Did she mention that I've given them nearly $180,000 over the past decade, or play you the recording of them planning to manipulate me into financing Travis's latest project?" The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "There's a recording?" she finally asked. After sending Aunt Patricia the voicemail and my financial documentation, the family narrative began to crack. She called back the next day, her voice tight with anger, not at me, but at my parents. "I had no idea, Savannah. This isn't right." Her support created the first fissure in my parents' carefully constructed story. By the third week, when emotional manipulation hadn't worked, my family shifted to more direct pressure. My father left voicemails mentioning financial commitments already made in anticipation of your contribution and potential legal consequences of withdrawing promised support. Though I knew these were empty threats, I had never signed any agreements. Each message still triggered anxiety attacks that left me sleepless and questioning my decision. The lowest point came when I discovered they had attempted to access my bank accounts. My financial advisor called to verify I had requested copies of all my account information sent to my parents' address. I hadn't. "Someone claiming to be you called, but our security protocols flagged the attempt," she explained. "I suggest changing all your passwords and security questions immediately." Realizing they would go this far shocked me back into full awareness of how necessary my boundaries were. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in financial abuse cases, securing additional protections and sending cease and desist letters regarding any further attempts to access my financial information. Meanwhile, at work, I threw myself into projects with renewed focus, channeling my emotional turmoil into professional achievement. My colleagues noticed the change, not just my productivity, but a new assertiveness in meetings and presentations. "You seem different lately," my manager commented after I successfully led a client pitch, "more confident." I was different. Without the constant drain on my finances and emotional energy, I discovered resources I didn't know I had. I enrolled in the graduate program I'd postponed for years. I consulted with a financial advisor about buying my first home, a goal that had seemed impossible while supporting my family. For the first time, my salary was truly mine, and the freedom was both terrifying and exhilarating. But the retaliation wasn't over. 5 weeks after our confrontation, Travis appeared at my apartment unannounced, his expression a calculated mix of remorse and brotherly concern. "Mom and Dad don't know I'm here," he said, as I reluctantly let him in. "I'm worried about you, sis. This isolation isn't healthy." I maintained my distance, recognizing the familiar pattern. Travis had always been sent as the peacemaker when my parents feared losing control. "I'm not isolated," I replied. "I'm just not financing your lifestyle anymore." His friendly facade cracked slightly. "This isn't just about money. You've torn apart our family over one misunderstood conversation." "It wasn't misunderstood," I said quietly. "It was finally understood perfectly." When emotional appeals didn't work, he shifted strategies, mentioning a concerning conversation he'd had with my boss at a community event. My blood ran cold. Travis knew my boss through a neighborhood association. "What did you say to him?" I demanded. Travis shrugged, his expression innocent, but eyes calculating. "Just that we're worried about your mental state lately. That you've been making irrational decisions and cutting off people who care about you." The implied threat was clear. They would attack my professional reputation if I didn't fall back in line. Rather than intimidating me, this new low crystallized something I'd been struggling to accept. This wasn't a temporary family disagreement that could be resolved with time and communication. This was a fundamental breach that required permanent boundaries. "I think you should leave," I said, moving toward the door. "Mom's talking about selling the house," he said, his final attempt at leverage. "Dad's health isn't great." "Is that what you want? To force them into financial ruin because your feelings got hurt?" I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the charming boy I'd protected and supported, but a man who had been taught his entire life that his needs superseded mine. "What I want is for all of you to take responsibility for your own lives, the way I've been taking responsibility for mine since I was 18. After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment feeling strangely peaceful despite the escalation. They had played their best cards: family shame, legal threats, professional sabotage, and while each had hurt, none had broken my resolve. I was learning that I could withstand their retaliation because I was stronger than the role they had assigned me. That night, I wrote in my journal, "They can only take what I give them. And I'm not giving any more." Hey everyone, as we reach this turning point in my story, I'd love to know if you've ever had to set difficult boundaries with family. Drop a comment below, and if you're finding value in this journey, please hit that like button to help others find this video. Subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. I promise the next part of this story takes an unexpected turn you won't want to miss. Now let's continue with what happened next. The most surprising developments in my journey came from unexpected directions. 6 weeks after cutting financial ties with my family, I received an email from my cousin Megan, my father's niece, whom I'd only met at occasional family gatherings. "I heard what happened through Aunt Patricia," she wrote. "The same thing happened to me with Uncle Richard years ago. Can we meet over coffee the following weekend?" Megan revealed a pattern I hadn't known existed. My father had approached her for investment opportunities multiple times after she inherited money from her grandfather. When she declined my parents, and Travis had painted her as selfish and gradually excluded her from family events. "I always wondered why you never reached out to me," she said. "Now I understand. They probably told you I abandoned the family too." Megan introduced me to her husband James, a financial advisor who had helped her establish boundaries with my father. "Your situation is unfortunately common," he explained. "Financial abusers often target family members using emotional leverage to extract resources." Through Megan, I connected with 2 other extended family members who had similar experiences: a second cousin who had been pressured to loan money for one of my father's failed business ventures, and an uncle who had distanced himself after being expected to fund Travis's first college attempt. A pattern emerged of family members being valued for their financial contributions, then discarded when they established boundaries. These connections transformed my understanding of the situation. What I had experienced wasn't an isolated family dynamic but a systematic pattern of financial exploitation with multiple victims. For the first time, I wasn't facing this alone. I had allies who understood exactly what I was going through because they had lived through it themselves. Meanwhile, my professional life was flourishing. The energy previously spent managing my family's demands was now channeled into my career and education. 3 months after our confrontation, I was offered a senior position at my firm with a substantial salary increase. My graduate studies were progressing well, with professors noting my exceptional commitment to the program. But the most significant change was happening internally. In therapy, I began excavating the beliefs that had made me vulnerable to exploitation. The idea that my worth was tied to my usefulness, that love was conditional on sacrifice, that setting boundaries was selfish. Each session was painful but clarifying, like setting a broken bone so it could finally heal properly. My therapist suggested I join a support group for survivors of family financial abuse, where I heard stories that mirrored my own experience with eerie similarity. The same patterns of golden children and scapegoats of manipulation disguised as family loyalty, of threats and retaliation when the financial support ended. In this circle of strangers, I found more understanding than I had ever experienced in my own home. One evening after group, a woman named Eleanor, who had been estranged from her financially abusive parents for over a decade, asked me a question that shifted my perspective. What would you tell your younger self if you could go back to when this pattern started? The question haunted me for days. What would I tell 18-year-old Savannah, already programmed to sacrifice herself for family approval? What wisdom could have spared her years of exploitation and self-doubt? I began writing letters to my younger self, pouring out the guidance and reassurance I wished someone had given me. Your worth isn't measured by how much you give, I wrote. Love that comes with financial obligations isn't love at all, it's a transaction. These letters evolved into a blog, Breaking Free: Surviving Financial Family Abuse, where I anonymously shared my experience and the resources that had helped me. To my astonishment, the blog resonated with thousands of readers in similar situations, desperate for validation and practical advice on establishing financial independence from exploitative family systems. Comments flooded in. You're telling my exact story. I thought I was the only one. How did you find the courage to finally say no? The blog became a community of survivors, sharing strategies and supporting each other through the painful process of setting boundaries and weathering the inevitable retaliation. As the blog grew, I was invited to speak at financial literacy workshops and therapy conferences. Initially, I presented anonymously, still fearful of my family's reaction if they discovered my public advocacy. But with each presentation, each message from a reader who had found the strength to break free, my confidence grew. My story was helping others, and that purpose was healing something in me that money never could. 8 months after cutting ties with my family, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice lacked the manipulative warmth I was accustomed to, instead sounding genuinely distressed. "Your father's had a heart attack," she said without preamble. "He's stable, but the doctors say he needs surgery." The old Savannah would have immediately offered financial assistance driven by guilt and obligation. The new Savannah felt compassion but recognized the potential manipulation. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied carefully. "Which hospital is he in?" "Mercy General," she answered, followed by a telling pause. When I didn't immediately offer to help with medical bills, she added, "The procedure isn't fully covered by insurance. We're facing significant out-of-pocket costs. I'll visit him tomorrow," I said, neither accepting nor rejecting the implicit request. At the hospital, my father looked smaller, somehow vulnerable in a way I'd never seen him. Travis was noticeably absent. "He's trying to secure a loan for the medical expenses," my mother explained the message. Clear Travis was attempting to fulfill the role I had abandoned. My father regarded me warily. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, his tone a mixture of pride and resentment. I came to see how you're doing, not to discuss finances, I replied, setting a clear boundary. An uncomfortable conversation followed, with my parents alternating between genuine moments of connection and strategic mentions of medical costs and insurance limitations. I listened compassionately but maintained my position. Before leaving, I said simply, I care about your health, Dad, and I'm glad you're getting the treatment you need. But my financial support ended 8 months ago, and that hasn't changed. The visit clarified something important. I could maintain boundaries while still showing basic human compassion. Setting limits didn't make me cold or uncaring, it made me healthy. That evening, I published my first non-anonymous blog post using my real name and photograph. Financial abuse thrives in secrecy, I wrote. By sharing our stories openly, we break the cycles of shame and isolation that keep us vulnerable. The post went viral within financial literacy and family therapy circles, eventually being picked up by mainstream media outlets. Overnight, Breaking Free transformed from an anonymous blog to a recognized resource for financial abuse survivors, with me as its very visible founder. I was no longer hiding, no longer ashamed of establishing boundaries, no longer afraid of my family's retaliation. I had found my voice, and it was stronger than their manipulation had ever been. 10 months after I had cut financial ties with my family, the carefully constructed facade they had maintained began to crumble publicly. The catalyst was unexpected. A routine audit at my father's workplace revealed financial irregularities that triggered a broader investigation. As a mid-level manager at a manufacturing company, he had maintained an image of steady reliability for decades. The audit discovered he had been borrowing from company accounts, using his position to authorize payments to vendors that were actually being diverted to personal use. The news reached me through a former neighbor who still lived near my parents. "Did you hear about your dad?" she texted one morning. "It's all over the neighborhood. The police were at your parents' house yesterday." Initially, I assumed this was another manipulation tactic, a fabricated crisis designed to pull me back into financial support. But a quick online search confirmed the truth. Richard Mitchell had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into financial misappropriation. The local paper had published a brief article noting that the amounts involved exceeded $120,000 over a 5-year period. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, shock, vindication, and a strange sense of clarity. The financial pressure my parents had placed on me hadn't just been about supporting Travis, it had been about covering my father's theft. My contributions hadn't been supplementing their legitimate income, but replacing stolen funds that could no longer be diverted as the company increased its financial oversight. 3 days later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Detective Larson from the Financial Crimes Unit requesting a meeting. "We understand you've provided significant financial support to your parents and brother over the years," she explained. "We're trying to establish a complete picture of their financial situation." In her office the following day, I provided bank records documenting my loans and financial contributions. The detective listened attentively as I explained the pattern of requests, the manipulation tactics, and finally the voicemail that had exposed their intentions. "This recording is significant," she said after listening to the voicemail. "It establishes knowledge and intent." She explained that the investigation had expanded beyond my father's workplace theft to include potential tax fraud and insurance fraud. My parents had been claiming financial hardship to various institutions while concealing both my contributions and my father's illegal income. As the investigation progressed, more revelations emerged. Travis had been involved in the scheme, using his business management knowledge to help hide the diverted funds. The sports bar concept had never been a genuine business plan, but a potential vehicle for laundering money if the workplace theft was discovered. What I had interpreted as entitlement and laziness had partially been a cover for his role in managing the illegitimate family finances. Most shocking was learning that my grandmother's modest inheritance, the one my parents had suggested should be pooled for family use, had been mostly fictional. The actual inheritance had been substantial, but my father as executor had diverted the majority to accounts only he and my mother could access. The small amount disclosed to me had been part of the manipulation designed to make me feel that my contribution was just one piece of a collaborative family effort. The unraveling continued when Travis, facing potential charges himself, decided to cooperate with investigators in exchange for leniency. He provided detailed records of the financial manipulation, including a spreadsheet tracking my contributions with notes about which manipulation tactics had been most effective in each case. When Detective Larson showed me this document, I felt physically ill. Column after column documented strategies for and pressure points that my family had identified and exploited. My graduation promotions and even a brief relationship breakup were all listed as leverage opportunities, with notes on how each event had been used to extract money. This level of calculation is unusual even in financial exploitation cases, the detective commented. It's essentially a playbook for emotional manipulation. As the case built against my parents, I was called to provide testimony about my financial contributions. Sitting across from them in legal proceedings, I finally saw them clearly, not as the loving but flawed parents I had desperately wanted them to be, but as individuals who had systematically exploited their own daughter for financial gain. My father's expression remained impassive during my testimony, but my mother couldn't maintain her composure when I described discovering their plans through the accidental voicemail. She broke down not with remorse but with indignation, interrupting the proceedings to declare, "We deserve that money. We raised her, sacrifice for her education. Everything she earned was because of our investment in her." Her outburst confirmed what the evidence already showed in their minds. I had never been a daughter to love but an investment to yield returns. My education hadn't been supported so I could thrive, but so I could produce income for the family. My achievements weren't celebrated but calculated for their financial potential. The criminal case concluded with my father accepting a plea deal for financial fraud and misappropriation of funds. He received a 5-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 3 years. My mother, while not directly implicated in the workplace theft, faced charges for tax evasion and fraud related to my grandmother's inheritance. Travis received probation and community service in exchange for his testimony and full cooperation. As their legal troubles mounted, their social facade crumbled as well. Friends and extended family members who had believed their narrative about my abandonment now saw the truth. Several reached out with apologies for having believed my parents' version of events. Aunt Patricia organized a small family gathering to publicly acknowledge how I had been treated and to affirm that such exploitation wasn't acceptable in our extended family. The financial investigation also uncovered that my parents had been living far beyond their legitimate means for decades, their modest home concealing extensive debt, luxury purchases hidden in storage units, and secret vacation properties that had been presented to the family as friends' homes we were borrowing. The middle-class lifestyle that had been used to justify their need for my financial support had been a carefully maintained illusion. In the aftermath of the criminal proceedings, I was approached by the district attorney about participating in educational programs about financial abuse within families. Your documentation and the recording provide a textbook case of how these situations develop and escalate, she explained. Your story could help others recognize the warning signs. 2 years have passed since that accidental voicemail changed the course of my life. At 34, I finally created the life that was delayed for so long by financial exploitation. I purchased my first home, a sunny 2-bedroom condo overlooking the city park. I completed my graduate degree with honors and accepted a position as financial director at a nonprofit organization that provides resources to survivors of economic abuse. My blog evolved into a full foundation breaking free financial recovery, offering resources, legal assistance, and support groups for victims of family financial abuse. The foundation recently partnered with 3 major universities to conduct research on intergenerational financial exploitation patterns and develop early intervention programs. My father continues to serve his sentence, maintaining that he was entitled to both company funds and my contributions because of his role as head of the family. My mother, after completing a shorter sentence, reached out through her court-mandated therapist indicating she wanted to reconcile. The carefully worded letter suggested she had gained insights into her behavior, but still contained subtle language about moving forward as a family without acknowledgement of the harm caused. After careful consideration and consultation with my own therapist, I declined the reconciliation attempt. Healing doesn't require me to reestablish contact with people who systematically exploited me, I wrote in my response. I wish you well in your journey, but my boundaries remain in place. Travis took a different path. After completing his probation, he moved across the country and surprisingly found legitimate employment as an assistant manager at a retail store. 6 months ago, he sent a handwritten letter that, unlike my mother's attempt, contained a genuine apology. I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote. What we did to you was calculated and cruel. I'm writing only to tell you that I recognize the harm we caused, that it was wrong, and that I'm committed to never treating anyone that way again. You deserved a real brother, not a conspirator in your exploitation. I haven't responded yet. Some wounds take longer to heal, and I'm giving myself permission to process this potential reconciliation at my own pace without the pressure of family obligation that controlled me for so long. The financial impact of breaking free has been significant. Without supporting 3 additional adults, I discovered that my income was more than sufficient for my needs. The money previously sent to my family now funds my retirement accounts, a travel fund that has already taken me to 3 countries. I'd always dreamed of visiting, and donations to organizations that support financial literacy and abuse recovery. The most profound changes, however, have been internal. I no longer measure my worth by what I can provide to others or seek validation through sacrifice. I've developed genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than transaction. For the first time in my adult life, I make decisions based on my own needs and values, without the weight of artificial family obligations. My story caught the attention of a major publishing house, resulting in a book deal for Not Your Family ATM, breaking the cycle of financial exploitation. The advance, ironically larger than what my parents had expected me to invest in Travis's fictional sports bar, will be partially used to establish a scholarship fund for survivors of financial abuse seeking education after breaking free from exploitative family systems. Last month, I was invited to testify before a state legislative committee considering expanded protections for victims of family financial exploitation. Financial abuse doesn't always look like a stranger stealing an elderly person's retirement, I explained to the legislators. Sometimes it looks like Sunday dinner with expectations of paying your brother's bills attached to dessert. Sometimes it's parents who see their child's paycheck as family income. Sometimes it's decades of just until I get on my feet that's designed to never end. The committee chair asked what I would want other victims to know, what message might have helped me recognize my situation earlier. I thought carefully before answering. Family loyalty should never require one-way financial sacrifice, I replied. Love doesn't come with a price tag or loan terms. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do for yourself is to close the family ATM permanently. The room fell silent before erupting into supportive applause, legislators, advocates, and other survivors acknowledging a truth that had taken me too long to learn. As I look toward the future, I feel neither triumph nor bitterness about how events unfolded. The justice that came through the legal system wasn't what freed me. I had already liberated myself by setting boundaries and walking away. The criminal consequences my family faced were simply the natural outcome of their choices, not my victory. What I feel instead is profound gratitude for that accidental voicemail, the moment of unintended transparency that allowed me to finally see the truth I had been hiding from myself. Without that catalyst, I might still be writing checks, postponing dreams, and believing that my worth was measured in what I could provide rather than who I am. For anyone watching who recognizes their own story in mine, whether you're currently supporting family members who are capable of supporting themselves, or you're made to feel guilty for having boundaries around your resources, remember this: you are not responsible for financially supporting capable adults even if they're related to you. Family obligation ends where exploitation begins. And you deserve to build a future with your own resources designed around your own dreams. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If my story has resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family financial dynamics in the comments below. How did you recognize when support became exploitation? What boundaries have you established to protect yourself? Your insights might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today. Please like this video if it's provided value, subscribe for more authentic stories about family dynamics and personal growth, and share with anyone who might be struggling with similar situations. Sometimes the most powerful gift we can give each other is the knowledge that we're not alone in our experiences. Until next time, remember that true family supports your growth rather than exploiting your success. And sometimes the family that truly values you isn't the one you were born into, but the one you build for yourself after breaking free.